Good evening, travelers. Welcome to Whispers at Night. Tonight, we're rolling into the dark spine of America's roadway network with 8 verified trucker terror encounters that will make every way station and mile marker feel like a warning. These aren't campfire tales. They come straight from driver logs, dash cam footage, CB recordings, and incident reports that fleets don't like to discuss after sunrise. We'll ride the long black ribbon where headlights vanish into nothing and routine routes turn impossible. Phantom riders signaling on Interstate 80, exit signs that loop back on themselves on US 50, and rigs that pass the same gas station 3 times while the clock refuses to move. What's most chilling? The patterns repeat. Different years, different drivers, the same mile markers whispering the same impossible details. On highways that never sleep, something else clearly doesn't either. If you're new here, hit subscribe and tap the bell. Every night we bring you the real reports and raw audio most people never hear. Keep your eyes on the mirrors, your hands at 10 and 2 and your mind open, because out there, the ordinary turns on you fast. Set your cruise if you dare. This is Whispers at Night, and we're merging onto the stretch where reality thins. And not everyone who rides shotgun is alive. According to his fuel log, David Ramirez should have been pulling into Denver just as the sky began to glow with the soft orange light of dawn. His records, always meticulous, always exact, said so. The logbook showed a full tank of diesel purchased at 11:25 p.m. in Pueblo, enough fuel to carry him the easy 120-mile stretch north with nearly 40 gallons left in reserve. His Garmin GPS, mounted just above the dashboard of his 2018 Peterbilt 389, had displayed an ETA of GLOD 4:42 a.m., accounting for a bit of overnight roadwork and David's own preference for driving slightly under the posted limit. But when the first sunlight crested the jagged silhouette of the Rocky Mountains that October morning, David Ramirez was nowhere near Denver. He was still grinding down the same flat, dark, and endless stretch of US Highway 50, a highway he'd entered nearly 6 hours earlier. His odometer showed an impossible 800-plus additional miles traveled. His fuel gauge hovered near empty. Yet the roadside scenery outside his windshield hadn't changed at all. David was not the type of man to get lost. At 38 years old, with more than a decade of long-haul trucking under his belt, he had earned his reputation as the mechanic with a map for a brain. His years in the U.S. Army, maintaining convoys across Iraq, had sharpened his discipline for logistics, fuel efficiency, and record-keeping. Civilian life had not dulled those habits. If anything, trucking had reinforced them. His binder of logs looked less like a trucker's notes and more like a scientist's field journal. The Peterbilt he drove was his pride. Chrome polished like a mirror, dash outfitted with the latest gadgets, dash cams pointing both ways, a Qualcomm unit logging his hours, even a backup paper atlas folded to his usual routes. Reliability was not just David's reputation, it was his identity. So when something on the road didn't add up, David knew it. That night began no different than 100 others. He rolled out of the Flying J truck stop in Pueblo at 11:47 p.m. sharp. Trailer loaded with precision machined steel parts for a Denver assembly plant. He had made this same run dozens of times. The route was muscle memory, past the quiet Colorado State Fairgrounds, across the dark grid of Fowler, through Manzanola, and on toward La Junta before veering northwest to Colorado Springs. From there, a short jog to I-25 north into Denver. The sky was clear, temperatures just above freezing, the air crisp enough to sting when he opened his window for a quick smoke. The highway stretched like a ribbon into blackness, only the occasional set of headlights from other truckers or restless travelers punctuating the void. David set his cruise at 66 Mara, dialed the CB to channel 19, and let his favorite Tejano station hum through the static as he sipped bitter coffee from a dented thermos. At 12:22 a.m., David rolled through, Rocky Ford, a town so small and quiet at night that it could almost be mistaken for a movie set. He scribbled the time in his log. The only life he saw were a few dusty pickups parked outside a 24-hour diner whose neon open sign flickered against the grain elevator towering in the background. A billboard just beyond town advertised an auto dealer that had been there since before David's army years. All of it ordinary, all of it unremarkable, until it wasn't. Exactly 21 minutes later, his headlights swept across the same grain elevator, the same diner, the same peeling billboard. Rocky Ford. Again. At first, David thought he'd made a mistake. Long-haul drivers lived with something called highway hypnosis. The blur of mile after mile where landscapes blend together. Maybe he'd confused this with some other small Colorado town, but then he glanced at his GPS. The glowing blue arrow blinked stubbornly at Rocky Ford, mile marker 43. His stomach dropped. He knew this couldn't be right. The odometer confirmed he'd driven just over 20 miles since logging Rocky Ford, exactly the distance he expected to cover in that time. Yet somehow, impossibly, the truck had brought him right back where he started. David pulled over at the first shoulder wide enough to handle his rig. He went through his usual diagnostic ritual. GPS, no error. Signal strong. Accuracy plus 3 feet. Odometer, advanced exactly as expected. Atlas, he unfolded the thick pages on his lap. Highway 50 west out of Rocky Ford was straight as an arrow. No loops, no hidden service roads. It didn't add up. Unease gnawed at him. David started the engine again, telling himself it was a fluke, some technical hiccup. He merged back onto the empty road, promising he'd pay sharper attention this time. Every landmark, every mile marker, every sound, he'd note it all. 12:52 a.m. He saw the Rocky Ford city limits sign again. He wrote it down, jaw tight, pulse rising. 10 minutes later, the whacked abandoned farmhouse with the red barn came into view. The barn door sagged on its hinges, the windows gaped like empty sockets, and a rusted water tower leaned drunkenly behind it. David remembered it from before, exactly from before. This was no mistake. Hands trembling, David grabbed the CB mic. Breaker 19, this is Ramirez westbound on US 50. Anyone got a copy? Static hissed, then a gravelly voice crackled through. This here's Dusty Collins, eastbound just past La Junta. What's eating you, Ramirez? David swallowed hard. Dusty, I think I'm stuck in, I don't know what. A loop. I keep passing the same town, Rocky Ford. Same damn landmarks, over and over. There was a long pause, just static and faint crackles of interference. Then Dusty's voice came back, a little softer. You sure you ain't just running on fumes, son? Them night runs mess with your head. I seen good drivers swear they drove in circles. But David's gut told him this was different. His gauges worked. His head was clear. The world itself was wrong. He began documenting. Voice memos, photos of the GPS, scribbles in his logbook. Anything to prove he wasn't losing his mind. At 1:30 a.m., David rolled past Rocky Ford again. Same diner, same burned-out street lamp by the rail crossing. Only this time, something new froze him cold. Another truck sat idling in the diner lot. Not just any truck. His truck. The sight hit David like a gut punch. There, beneath the buzzing yellow floodlights of the diner lot, Peterbilt 389. Identical to his own. Same flame red paint glinting under the lamps. Same company logo stenciled on the door. Even the crooked mud flap on the passenger side, the one he'd been meaning to replace for months, was there. David's mouth went dry. At first, he thought maybe another driver from his company had pulled in. It wasn't uncommon for rigs in the same fleet to look alike. But as he slowed his truck to a crawl, headlights sweeping across the lot, he realized this wasn't just similar. It was perfect. Same custom grill guard, Same tiny crack in the windshield from a stone chip outside Amarillo last winter. Same dent in the driver's side step. It was his truck. David parked a few feet away, engine idling low, and climbed down. His boots crunched against the gravel, every sound amplified in the desert quiet. He could see condensation puffing in the cold air as he approached the duplicate. The other Peterbilt's engine hummed like a living thing. Heat shimmered faintly from the hood. Whoever, or whatever, was inside had only just pulled in. David stepped closer and peered through the cab window. His stomach lurched. On the passenger seat sat his gay logbook, his handwriting, the exact neat block, letters he had just written 20 minutes earlier. He could even see the fresh entry, 12:52 a.m., Rocky Ford city limits. The driver's seat, however, was empty. David backed away, heart hammering in his chest. "Dusty," he whispered into his CB mic, barely able to keep his voice steady. "You still got ears on me?" Static filled the cab. Then Dusty's reply. "Yeah, Ramirez, I read ya. Where you at now?" David swallowed. I think I'm looking at my own damn truck." The CB went silent for a beat. Then Dusty barked a nervous laugh. "Say again? You been hitting that diner whiskey? Ain't nobody driving 2 rigs at once." David's hands shook as he gripped the mic. "I'm serious. It's here. My truck. My logbook. Everything. But the cab's empty." Dusty didn't laugh this time. His voice came back low, uneasy. "Get the hell out of there, Dave. Whatever you're seeing, it ain't yours. Get back in your ride and keep rolling." But David couldn't bring himself to move just yet. Something pulled him toward the duplicate. He reached out, hand trembling, and touched the hood. It was warm. Too warm. As if it had been running hard for hours, just like his own. The smell of diesel exhaust clung to the air. And then, faint but unmistakable, he heard it. The sound of a pencil scratching across paper inside the cab. David's breath caught. He leaned closer, squinting through the glass again. There, in the driver's seat now, sat himself. Not just a reflection, another David Ramirez, hunched over the wheel, scribbling in the logbook. Same face, same stubble, same dark eyes, shadowed by fatigue. But this version didn't look up, didn't acknowledge him, just kept writing, over and over, filling the pages. David stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own boots. He bolted for his real truck, climbed into the cab and slammed the door shut. His chest heaved with ragged breaths. For a long moment, he sat frozen, staring at the duplicate rig through his windshield. The diner's neon flickered, buzzing in the silence. Then, without warning, the duplicate Peterbilt blinked out of existence. No sound, no flash, just gone. One moment solid and humming with life, the next nothing but an empty patch of cracked asphalt. David sat gripping his wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He drove on. The next loop began just like the others, 20 minutes west, and then Rocky Ford again. Same landmarks, same burned-out lamp, same damn diner. But this time, the diner wasn't empty. David saw people inside. Dozens of them, pressed against the fogged-up windows, staring out at him. Men in old-fashioned trucker caps, women in faded dresses, children clutching stuffed animals. Their faces pale, eyes hollow, movements stiff. As David's rig rolled past, every head inside the diner turned in unison to follow him. He gunned the throttle. By the 6th loop, the CB was no comfort. Instead of normal chatter, his radio began spitting out fragments from other times. Country songs from the 1970s, weather alerts for blizzards that happened decades ago, even news bulletins, one announcing Reagan's re-election, another warning of the Challenger disaster. Each time the loop reset, the broadcast grew older, like time itself was rewinding inside the circle. And then came the voices. Not Dusty, not Maria, not any trucker David knew. These voices were whispers, hundreds of them, overlapping, rising from the static like a crowd murmuring in an empty church. Some begged him to stop, others told him to turn back, and some simply repeated his own words back at him, distorted and hollow like echoes from a cave. David wasn't alone on the road anymore. He saw other trucks, his truck, rolling toward him in the opposite lane, each one driven by another David Ramirez, eyes fixed forward, hands rigid on the wheel. Sometimes it was just one, sometimes 3 or 4 in a row. Once, a whole convoy of identical Peterbilts thundered past, each trailer rattling with the same cargo bound for Denver, each cab holding another version of himself. None of them ever looked at him. But as they passed, David swore he could feel their presence pressing against his mind, like a heavy fog trying to seep into his thoughts. The loops kept coming. David tried everything, pulling over, turning around, even abandoning his truck and walking down the asphalt. But no matter what, he always ended up back in the cab, headlights cutting through the Colorado night, Rocky Ford rising ahead once more. By the 14th loop, David stopped checking his watch. Time meant nothing. His logbook was filled with page after page of repeated entries. His GPS had long since frozen on coordinates that never changed. All he could do was drive. And somewhere deep inside, a cold realization began to settle. Maybe there was no outside anymore. Maybe Rocky Ford wasn't just a town on Highway 50. Maybe Rocky Ford was forever. By the 15th loop, David's nerves were shredded raw. His hands trembled constantly on the wheel, knuckles cracked and bleeding from gripping too tight. His throat was dry no matter how much water he drank. The thermos of coffee had long gone cold, but he forced swallows anyway, desperate to stay awake, if sleep even mattered in this place. Every loop was the same. And yet, not the same. The Rocky Ford sign, the lamp, the diner, the hollow faces. And sometimes, when the road bent just right, he'd catch sight of something moving across the fields. Shadows, tall and thin, slipping silently between rows of abandoned fence posts, always at the edge of his vision. On the 17th loop, Dusty came back on the CB. "David," the voice croaked, static chewing the edges. David nearly dropped the mic. "Dusty, you're alive? Where the hell are you?" Long silence, then almost a whisper. "Don't stop. Don't let it catch you." The words slithered into his mind like ice water. "What do you mean? Dusty, tell me how to get out." But the line had already dissolved into static again. By the 20th loop, David snapped. He slammed his fist against the steering wheel and screamed at the windshield. "I'm not your damn puppet. You hear me? I won't play this game anymore." The road answered with silence. His fury boiling over, David jammed the brakes and yanked the wheel, pulling his rig across the center line. The trailer fishtailed, tires shrieking against asphalt. He skidded sideways until the Peterbilt shuddered to a stop, blocking both lanes. For the first time, he refused to move. Minutes dragged by, then headlights bloomed in his mirrors. A truck approached, then another and another. Within moments, the highway behind him filled with an unbroken chain of glowing headlights. Dozens, maybe hundreds of identical rigs, each one a mirror of his own, each one driven by another David Ramirez. They slowed as they neared, but none honked, none swerved. One by one, they rolled to a stop, engines growling low in unison. David's breath caught in his throat. It felt like staring into a sea of his own reflections, each one watching him from behind the glass. Then, the CB crackled. A chorus of voices, his voices, poured through, overlapping, distorted, repeating the same phrase. "Move the truck! David shook his head violently. No, I won't. You can't make me. The whispering rose to a deafening roar, the air inside the cab vibrating as if the very metal of the truck hummed with it. Move. The truck. David's vision blurred. His skull throbbed like it might split apart. In desperation, he shoved the door open and jumped down onto the asphalt. Cold night air hit him like a slap. He stumbled into the center of the road, arms spread wide. Then hit me, he shouted at the line of headlights. If I'm not real, if none of this is real, then run me over and end it. The engines growled in answer, but none of the trucks moved. Instead, the headlights blinked out, all at once. Darkness swallowed the highway. For the first time in what felt like centuries, the world was silent. No idling engines, no static, no wind. David stood trembling, heart hammering in the void. He turned slowly, eyes straining in the pitch black. The diner lights had vanished. The Rocky Ford sign was gone. Even the road beneath his boots felt uncertain, dissolving into the dark like ash on water. Dusty? He whispered, voice cracking. Silence. Then, behind him, footsteps. David spun. A figure stood just outside the circle of darkness. Tall, thin. Its shape wavered, as if made of smoke. And yet its eyes, black, bottomless, locked onto his with a hunger that rooted him in place. The figure raised one long, crooked hand and pointed past him. David turned. There, faint and flickering, like a mirage, was a highway sign glowing in pale blue light. Denver, 185 miles. Hope flared in his chest. Without thinking, David bolted back to his truck. He hauled himself into the cab, slammed the door, and fired the engine. The gauges glowed steady, the hum familiar and grounding. He shifted into gear and floored the accelerator. As the Peterbilt roared forward, the world around him rippled like water disturbed by a stone. The blackness peeled away, replaced by open highway stretching ahead. For the first time, Rocky Ford didn't appear. Hours later, maybe real hours, maybe another illusion, David spotted the Denver skyline glittering faint on the horizon. Relief washed through him so hard he nearly wept. But then his eyes drifted to the passenger seat. There, sitting neatly atop his logbook, was a second logbook, identical in every way, except the handwriting inside wasn't his. The last entry read, "Loop broken. For now." David's hands shook as he reached for it. The ink was still wet, and when he looked up again at the road ahead, the glowing letters of a new green sign cut through the dark. Rocky Ford, 2 miles. David Ramirez never made it to Denver. Breaker 19. Anyone else catching sight of this convoy up ahead? The words hissed through the static of Marcus Red Hawk Johnson's CB radio at 3:17 a.m., slicing the desert silence like a knife. Marcus stiffened in his seat. He was deep on Interstate 40, somewhere in the long, lonely stretch between Gallup and Grants, New Mexico. A place where stars burned brighter than city lights ever allowed, and the desert carried whispers older than the asphalt laid upon it. He eased forward in his seat, broad shoulders tensing, eyes scanning the endless ribbon of highway. Nothing. Just the faint shimmer of heat haze-like distortion that rose even in the cold November night, and the distant silhouettes of mesas carved against the sky. His mirrors reflected emptiness. No convoy, no taillights, just the steady hum of his 2016 Peterbilt 579 eating miles beneath him. Marcus wasn't a rookie. At 35, he'd logged almost half his life behind a wheel in one form or another. First in the Army, hauling equipment across war-scarred landscapes. Then on America's highways, hauling freight that seemed mundane by comparison, but carried its own weight of responsibility. He had earned his call sign, Red Hawk, both from his Cherokee heritage and his reputation for eyes that missed nothing on the road. And yet tonight, his eyes saw only emptiness. He leaned forward, flicked the CB receiver. Breaker 19, this is Red Hawk, westbound I-40 near mile marker 120. Negative on that convoy. You sure you're not seeing shadows? The reply crackled back almost instantly. Too fast, too sharp for hesitation. The voice was male, carrying a flat Midwestern drawl, but with something off. Not old exactly, but aged, weathered, like a reel-to-reel recording playing back through torn speaker cloth. Roger, Red Hawk, they're running hard, westbound, 20 strong at least. No markings, no chat. Tear back to me either. Just tail lights. No clearance lights, no running lamps. Like they're trying to ghost the night. Marcus frowned, a tight knot forming in his chest. Running dark? No markers? That wasn't just unsafe. It was suicidal. He eased his truck up a slight grade, engine rumbling steady beneath his boots. And then, he saw them. A line of red pinpricks stretched across the far horizon. At first, he thought they were aircraft beacons, but no. They moved too low, too smooth, too perfectly aligned. Tail lights, dozens of them, each burning a muted crimson, weaving together into a river of blood flowing westward against the black canvas of night. Marcus tightened his grip on the wheel. He knew convoys. He'd seen armored columns snake across deserts overseas, watched military rigs hammer down in close formation. But this wasn't that. These trucks, from the distance, their shapes looked wrong. Boxier, shorter trailers, rounded corners that belonged to rigs from another lifetime. He swallowed dryly, thumb brushing the worn leather braid his grandmother had tied around his CB mic years ago for protection. Respect the land, boy, she'd told him. Respect the roads. They carry the memory of everyone who's ever walked them, living or gone. Marcus drew a slow breath and keyed his mic again. Breaker 19, convoy visual confirmed, westbound ahead. This is Red Hawk in a white Pete. You still got eyes? Static answered first, a long sigh like wind across canyon stone. Then the voice returned, clearer now, but layered strangely, as if echoing through distance not measured in miles. Still got 'em. Been pacing 'em 10 minutes. 75 easy, maybe 80. Can't raise 'em. They don't talk back. A pause. Wind rushed through the speaker, and behind it, something else. The low growl of an engine that sounded nothing like any diesel Marcus had heard since his old man's stories of the 50s. There's something else, Red Hawk. They don't belong out here. Marcus's pulse drummed heavy. He leaned forward as his headlights reached the top of the grade. And there they were, 20 rigs, maybe more, stretched across the road like a caravan from another century. Chrome glinted faintly where desert starlight kissed metal. Their trailers were stubby, rounded at the edges, narrower than anything DOT regulations allowed today. Their taillights glowed unnaturally steady, no flicker, no variance, as if every bulb burned from the same unseen current. And between them, a uniformity that defied human error. Exact spacing, exact rhythm. Trucks weaving curves with perfect synchronization, as if guided by one will. Marcus muttered under his breath, Lord have mercy. His CB came alive again, but this time, not with the first driver. A different voice cut in, deeper, older, and laced with a strange finality. Breaker for Shadow Fleet. This is Desert Ghost, running drag. We got company back there. Cherokee Rose. No, Red Hawk in a white Pete. Should we let him by? The words froze Marcus's blood. Shadow Fleet. He'd never heard the name before, but every bone in his body told him it was nothing good. His grandmother's warning screamed in his ears. He keyed the mic, steadying his voice. Desert Ghost. "This is Red Hawk. I'm not here to pass, just keeping my lane. You boys running a special haul tonight?" Silence. Then, a voice so heavy with sorrow Marcus could almost feel the weight of it pressing through the static. "We're always running, Red Hawk. Been running since '52. Still trying to finish what we started. Some races don't end, even when the drivers do." The channel dissolved into hiss. Marcus stared at the convoy, heart pounding, realization dawning like ice water down his spine. He wasn't watching men. He was watching memories. Or worse, ghosts that refused to fade. Marcus felt his palms sweat against the steering wheels. The convoy ahead was close enough now that he could make out the outlines of their cabs. Long-nosed Kenworths, autocars, Diamond T's, trucks that belonged in museums or scrapyards, not barreling down I-40 at 80 miles an hour. Their chrome gleamed like it had been polished yesterday, but the metal carried a weight, a dullness, like tombstones reflecting moonlight. He rolled his window down slightly, letting in the cold desert air. It hit him sharp, biting, but beneath it came another scent that shouldn't have been there. Hot oil, singed rubber, and diesel heavy with sulfur. The smell of old engines, the kind he remembered from his grandfather's barn in Oklahoma, when the man would crank up relics just to hear them breathe one last time. But these weren't relics. They were alive. The CB crackled again. That first driver, the one who'd spotted them before Marcus did, came back on, his voice trembling now. "Red Hawk, you still with me? You seeing what I'm seeing?" Marcus keyed his mic, throat tight. "Affirmative. Convoy's running hard, too clean, too damn uniform." The driver's reply came fast, words tumbling over each other. "Brother, I've been out here 30 years. Never seen a run like this. I'm pulling over. I ain't chasing no ghost trucks tonight." Then his carrier dropped. Nothing but static. Marcus swore softly. He was alone now. Just him, his Pete, and the shadow fleet. He watched as the convoy stretched farther, but something was wrong. The desert around them seemed thinner. Landmarks blurred at the edges of his vision. A billboard he'd passed 100 times before, advertising fireworks in Arizona, flickered like a bad TV signal, then vanished altogether. His headlights, bright LEDs, seemed weaker against the black. And then, one of the trucks fell back. A deep green Kenworth from the late '40s eased out of formation, its chrome grille catching Marcus's lights. The cab's windows were dark, but inside he swore he saw a figure. A driver slumped forward, one skeletal hand gripping the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift. The truck held steady at 70, pacing Marcus's Pete. The CB hissed. A new voice came through, hollow as a cavern. "You ride clean, Red Hawk. Strong engine, steady hands, but you don't belong here." Marcus swallowed hard, thumb pressing the mic. "Neither do you." Silence. Then the faintest laugh. Not cruel, not mocking, just tired. So tired it made Marcus's own bones ache. Maybe not, but roads remember us. Highways hold us. Some debts can't be cleared, not by law, not by God. The Kenworth surged ahead again, slotting perfectly back into formation without so much as a wobble. The entire fleet glided as one organism, 20 machines breathing in unison. Marcus's knuckles whitened on the wheel. He had a choice. Ease off, let them go, pretend none of this ever happened, or hold steady, keep pace, and risk being dragged into whatever nightmare bound those rigs to the asphalt. His grandmother's voice echoed in his skull. "Don't follow the shadows, boy. Respect them, but don't follow." And yet, something in him couldn't look away, couldn't ease off. He had to know. The desert shifted again. Marcus blinked, and suddenly, the horizon was wrong. The mesas he'd been tracking on his right side were gone. The sky looked lower, darker. The stars drowned out as if swallowed by storm clouds. His GPS, mounted on the dash, blinked red and spat nonsense coordinates. Time didn't feel right either. His clock said 3:48 a.m., but it felt like hours had passed since the first call. Up ahead, the Shadow Fleet's lead rig, a monstrous white freightliner with twin stacks belching smoke that vanished to, quickly, cut its headlights on for the first time. The beams weren't yellow halogen or modern LED. They were pale, ghostly, the kind of light you'd expect from a lantern swinging deep in a mine. And under that glow, Marcus saw the road signs ahead. But they weren't green reflective DOT markers. These were blackened metal, numbers scorched into them, pointing west toward towns he knew no longer existed. Fort Wingate, Defiance, Laguna Station, places wiped off maps decades ago. His stomach turned cold. He wasn't just pacing a convoy. He was sliding sideways into their world. He slammed his palm against the dashboard, muttering, "Hell no, not me, not tonight." The CB sprang to life again, every speaker in his cab vibrating with the force of it. Dozens of voices at once, overlapping like a choir of engines. "Run with us, Red Hawk. Just one haul. One last westbound push. You've got the rig. You've got the blood. Don't fight the road. Join it." The voices weren't asking. They were pulling. The Pete's engine growled deeper, RPMs climbing though his foot hadn't pressed harder. His speed crept toward 85, 90. Marcus fought the wheel, sweat rolling down his temple. No, damn it. I've got family waiting. I've got to run to finish in Flagstaff. I'm not yours. But the road disagreed. Marcus's Pete screamed at 95, the convoy dragging him into their rhythm. His tachometer's needle hovered in the red, but the engine didn't protest. It roared like it wanted this, like it remembered this. Out his left mirror, another truck slid into view, a battered Diamond T with its hood patched in primer. The driver's window was down, and in the passing glare of Marcus's lights, he caught a face, or what was left of one. Hollow sockets, skin charred black, teeth gritted around a cigarette that burned without ash. The thing raised two fingers in a lazy salute before the truck surged forward. Marcus's heart hammered. He gripped the mic like a lifeline. "I'm not one of you. I won't run this road." The response came soft, barely audible through the static. "Desert Ghost again. You already are, Red Hawk. Every mile you drive, you're one step closer to us. You think the highway don't keep score? Every wreck, every cross by the roadside, every driver that didn't make it home. They ride with us now." Marcus bit down hard, teeth aching. His grandmother's warning clawed through the fog. "Respect them, but don't follow." He shut his eyes for half a second, whispered, "Not me." Then he did something reckless. He let off the throttle. The Pete shuddered, engine braking screaming against the pull of momentum. His speed bled down, 90, 85, 75. The convoy surged ahead, headlights glowing like lanterns on a funeral train. Their voices crowded his cab, begging, cursing, taunting, until one by one they fell silent. And then, just as his speed dropped under 60, they were gone. No taillights, no smoke, no antique cabs crowding his mirrors, just empty blacktop under the stars, wind whistling clean through the desert. Marcus coasted to the shoulder, chest heaving. His dash clock still read 3:48 a.m. His logbook said he hadn't burned more than 12 minutes of drive time, yet his fuel gauge had dropped like he'd run 200 extra miles. He killed the engine, stepped out into the chill air. The desert was quiet, too quiet. No insects, no coyotes, just him and the endless dark. And then he saw it. A cross, fresh wood, planted crooked in the gravel not 20 feet from his rig. No flowers, no ribbons. Just a name, burned into the grain. Marcus Red Hawk Calloway, 2025. His blood ran cold. That wasn't possible. That was him. The wind kicked up, carrying with it the faint growl of old diesel engines fading into the horizon. Marcus climbed back into his Pete, slammed the door shut, and fired the engine. He didn't care about the load, didn't care about the logbook. He just needed out. Flagstaff, Phoenix, hell, even Oklahoma City. Anywhere that wasn't this cursed stretch of I-40. As the miles rolled beneath him, one truth sank heavy in his gut. The Shadow Fleet hadn't vanished. They'd let him go. For now. And every time he caught phantom taillights on a lonely highway, every time his CB crackled with voices from another era, Marcus knew he was still marked. The road hadn't finished with him yet. The Shadow Fleet always found their drivers again. Always. Ethan Monroe was reported missing on a route he had driven more than 200 times. The dispatcher at Western Ridge Freight had expected his check-in call by 6:30 a.m., yet hours passed without a word from his usual Phoenix to Salt Lake City run. Anxiety grew steadily at the dispatch center as the silence stretched through the morning hours. Ethan's absence was unusual, utterly uncharacteristic. Even minor delays usually prompted at least a quick radio update, but today there was nothing. Only a creeping, inexplicable silence. Ethan's 2022 Kenworth T680 was equipped with every safety and tracking system imaginable. Satellite communication devices, GPS units, emergency beacons, and digital monitoring systems all worked flawlessly, designed to prevent exactly this kind of disappearance. Yet according to all monitoring data, Ethan Monroe and his truck had simply vanished somewhere along Interstate 70 in eastern Utah during the early morning hours of December 15, 2023. At 40, Ethan was the epitome of the professional long-haul driver. His record over 14 years was flawless. Not a single preventable accident, moving violation, or late delivery. He had a reputation for punctuality and precision. Beyond his work ethic, he was a devoted husband, calling his wife Amanda every night at 8 p.m., a ritual unbroken throughout his career. That night, the call never came. Ethan's route planning was meticulous. He always built extra time into his schedules, accounting for weather, traffic, and mechanical issues. The Phoenix to Salt Lake corridor was his primary freight artery, a stretch of road he knew intimately. Every mile, every rest stop, and every hazard along the 525-mile journey. He had navigated it so many times that it had become a second nature, the rhythm of highway and diesel humming in his mind as he drove. Interstate 70 through Utah was as familiar to him as his own neighborhood streets. From the dramatic ascent through the Rockies to the long descent into the high desert near Grand Junction, Colorado, and the straight stretch across Utah's red rock landscape toward the Wasatch Mountains, Ethan knew each curve, each landmark, every stretch where weather could turn treacherous. That December night began like countless others. Ethan departed the Phoenix terminal at 11:15 p.m., hauling a trailer full of consumer electronics bound for distribution centers in Salt Lake City. The weather was ideal. Clear skies, mild temperatures above freezing. His pre-trip inspection revealed no mechanical issues. Fuel tanks were full, and electronic logs confirmed he was within hours of service regulations with ample time to complete the journey. Everything was normal. Everything was supposed to be normal. The first sign that something was wrong came near the small town of Green River, Utah. Highway signs that should have read Green River next 3 exits now displayed destinations that didn't belong anywhere near his route. Goblin Valley State Park, 37 miles, and Capitol Reef National Park, 89 miles. He rubbed his eyes and blinked, thinking it must be a simple mistake, perhaps new signage or fatigue-induced misreading. Yet as he pressed on, nothing matched expectations. His GPS confirmed Interstate 70, but the exits were unfamiliar. Moonstone Beach Recreation Area, The next exit read, an entirely unknown destination. His knowledge of Utah highways was extensive, yet this place had never appeared on any map, atlas, or navigation system he had studied. He keyed the CB radio. Breaker 19, this is Desert Runner westbound on I-70 near Green River. Can anyone confirm exits? Signs don't match my maps. Static. Only static responded. Normally, even at night, the highway carried a trickle of traffic and voices. But tonight, it was eerily silent. His cell phone showed full bars, yet failed to connect to either his dispatcher or Amanda. Text messages bounced back. His truck's satellite system reported no signal. Clear skies, perfect reception conditions, yet Ethan felt himself cut off from the world. As he drove, the highway began to distort subtly but undeniably. Familiar landmarks vanished, replaced by unfamiliar rock formations. Even the asphalt seemed wrong, gentle curves steering him from his intended path. Straight stretches appeared bent, optical illusions forcing him to follow the road's deceptive lead. His GPS devices contradicted each other. One directed him northwest toward Fossil Butte National Monument, another southwest toward Zion National Park, and a third displayed only location services unavailable. Please consult local maps. The contradiction was inexplicable. All units had worked flawlessly in Denver, showing strong satellite signals. Even the fuel readings grew alarming. Less than 2 hours out of Grand Junction, the tanks showed only 47 gallons remaining, far below the 150 gallons he expected. By all calculations, he should have been able to continue for hundreds of miles without refueling. He pulled off at the next exit, searching for answers, and found not a service area but a narrow dirt track vanishing into darkness. The exit sign promised services, fuel, food, lodging, but reality mocked him with a derelict, unmaintained road. Returning to the highway, unease turned to dread. The night deepened. Ethan began to understand that Interstate 70 itself seemed to be conspiring against him. Signs, exits, and curves weren't random. They were guiding him, shaping his path, pushing him toward isolation. The highway seemed alive, a malevolent intelligence bending asphalt, signage, and GPS signals to trap travelers. Mechanical issues followed. Steering resisted his inputs, brakes engaged without cause, and cruise control activated itself, accelerating beyond set speed limits. The most terrifying moment came when the truck began moving on its own. Invisible forces pushed Ethan's hands from the wheel as the vehicle veered toward an exit he had not chosen. The ramp led to a vast canyon. Rusting cars, trucks, and RVs glimmered in his headlights, scattered like bones in a desert graveyard. Some vehicles were decades old, others more recent. Ethan realized with horror that this canyon was the final destination for countless drivers lured by the highway. Many likely perished from thirst, exposure, or disorientation. In a desperate maneuver, he cut the engine completely. Momentum carried the truck forward, gradually stopping it. The invisible force lost its grip. Regaining control of the wheel, Ethan climbed down, leaving the truck behind, and began walking back toward the main highway. Along the roadside, abandoned vehicles dotted the desert, some containing skeletal remains. It became chillingly clear. He was walking through decades of victims. After nearly an hour, he reached Interstate 70. Traffic moved normally. Signs aligned with memory. GPS function returned. Cell phones buzzed with dozens of missed calls from Amanda and his dispatcher. Utah Highway Patrol Sergeant Rivera found him walking along the interstate near Green River. Ethan's truck was later recovered from the canyon. Miraculously, its fuel tanks were full. Investigators uncovered dozens of similar incidents over the previous decade. GPS anomalies, mechanical failures, false signage, and unexplainable disappearances. The canyon, dubbed the vehicular graveyard, contained remnants dating back to the 1960s. Geological surveys indicated unusual magnetic anomalies that could interfere with electronic equipment, offering a partial scientific explanation for GPS and communications failures. But nothing explained the invisible forces or the highway's apparent self-alteration. After a brief leave, Ethan returned to trucking but avoided Interstate 70 overnight through eastern Utah. He advocated for improved safety, enhanced communications, additional patrols, and increased monitoring of remote stretches. The Utah Department of Transportation eventually installed lighting, emergency call boxes, and active monitoring of traffic systems. Truck stop warning signs advised drivers to remain on main lanes and report unusual exits or signage. Other truckers shared similar stories nationwide, roads that seemed to hunt travelers, luring them from safety. Informal CB networks developed to warn of supernatural phenomena and mechanical anomalies specific to certain stretches of highway. Ethan's ordeal became a cautionary tale. Some roads had become predators, exploiting the familiarity drivers had with their routes. Experienced truckers learned to question unexpected signs, exits leading to unknown locations, and anomalies appearing only on remote stretches. Survival in long-haul trucking required not just skill and caution, but also the instinct to recognize when the highway itself had become the enemy. In the end, Interstate 70's predatory stretches served as a chilling reminder. Even the most familiar roads could hide horrors, and sometimes the highway was not merely asphalt and signage, but a cunning force capable of hunting anyone who dared traverse its lonely paths under the cover of darkness. I need to tell someone about what happened to me last Wednesday night on Highway 50 because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I'm a long-haul trucker. Been driving 18-wheelers for about 12 years now, mostly hauling freight between Nevada and Colorado. The name's Ethan, and I usually pride myself on being pretty level-headed. You have to be when you're carrying 60,000 pounds of cargo through mountain passes and endless desert stretches. That particular night, I was hauling a load of electronics from Reno to Denver. Nothing insanely valuable, but enough to make me cautious. I'd left Reno around 6 o'clock in the evening, planning to drive through the night since traffic would be lighter and I could make better time. My wife Claire was expecting me home by Friday afternoon, and I wanted to grab some sleep at the depot before heading to our place in Aurora. The weather was clear, just a regular November evening with temperatures dropping, but no snow in the forecast. Highway 50 through Nevada is called the loneliest road in America, for good reason. You can drive for hours without seeing another soul, just endless stretches of sagebrush and distant mountains. I actually prefer it that way most times. Gives me space to think, listen to podcasts, maybe call Claire when I hit spots with decent cell coverage. Around 9:30 that night, I was about 40 miles east of Austin, Nevada, when I first noticed the headlights in my mirrors. Now seeing another truck on Highway 50 isn't unusual. Plenty of us use it as an alternative to I-80. But something about this one caught my attention immediately. It was a Peterbilt. Looked like a 5 and 79 model from what I could tell. Painted solid black with no company logos, no DOT numbers, nothing. The trailer was one of those refrigerated units, also black, which struck me as odd because most reefers are white or silver to reflect heat. The whole setup looked expensive, maybe custom, but completely anonymous. I figured it was probably an owner-operator who liked to keep things low-key, though in 12 years of driving, I'd never seen a completely unmarked commercial rig. At first, I didn't think much of it. The guy was keeping a decent following distance, maybe 300 feet back, which is respectful spacing for night driving. But after about 20 minutes, I started getting this uncomfortable feeling in my gut. See, when you're driving long haul, you develop a rhythm, a pattern to your speed. Sometimes you'll push 70 on the straightaways, drop to 65 on the grades, slow to 55 around sharper curves. Most truckers behind you either match your average speed and gradually fall back, or find their own pace and pass. But this black rig, it was matching me move for move, like we were connected by some invisible cable. When I'd ease up to 72, I'd watch those headlights creep up to maintain that same 300-foot gap. Drop to 60, they'd fade back, keeping the distance perfect. After 30 minutes of this, I knew something wasn't right. I tried looking at the driver when we passed under the occasional streetlight near small towns, but the cab windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. What really started bothering me was how quiet my CB radio had become. Usually, even on Highway 50, you catch some chatter. drivers complaining about speed traps, warning about deer on the road. But ever since that black truck appeared, my CB had been dead silent except for static. I tried calling out a few times, "Westbound, you got your ears on?" but got nothing back. Even switching channels didn't help, just that low, empty hiss. I grabbed my phone to call Claire, let her know I was on schedule, but had no signal, which isn't unusual for that stretch. Still, the combination of the silent CB and that truck maintaining perfect distance made the hair on my neck prickle. About an hour into this strange dance, I decided to test something. There's a way station near Eastgate that's usually closed at night but has a wide pull-off where truckers sometimes stop to check their loads or grab a quick nap. I put on my turn signal early and started slowing for the exit. Sure enough, those headlights started blinking. Left turn signal matching mine. My mouth went dry, watching it happen. I kept slowing, dropped to about 40, then 35 as I approached the off-ramp. But at the last second I canceled my signal and accelerated, pushing my rig harder than I usually would. The black truck mirrored my exact move. Canceled signal, smooth acceleration, right back to that 300-foot distance. That's when I knew for certain this wasn't coincidence. This person had been deliberately following me for over 50 miles. My mind raced through possibilities, none good. Maybe someone knew what I was hauling. Electronics aren't drugs or guns, but a trailer full of laptops and tablets could be worth a lot to the right fence. Or maybe it was something else entirely, something worse. I'd heard truck stop stories. Drivers following you until you stop, then bad things happen. Hijackings where they'd beat you half to death and leave you in the desert. Some claimed crews would force you off the road in remote spots, make it look like you'd fallen asleep at the wheel. I'd always figured those were just trucker tales, but sitting there with that black rig glued to my bumper, the stories didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. The road ahead was particularly desolate. No town for 30 miles, no cell coverage. I started doing the math. About 3/4 of a tank, enough to make it to Ely without stopping, but still almost 2 hours away. The nearest rest stop was about 40 minutes ahead, a basic pull-off with bathrooms and a couple of semi-parking spots. I'd stopped there before, poorly lit with no security cameras, just a lonely spot in the middle of nowhere. No way I was pulling in with this black rig on my tail. I kept checking mirrors, hoping to see some identifying mark on the truck. Maybe a glimpse of a plate around a curve. But whoever was driving knew what they were doing, perfectly centered in the lane. The only thing I could make out was a small red LED on the dashboard glowing like an eye watching me. Even the trailer's marker lights were dim, barely legal, just bright enough to avoid attention. Then something happened that made my whole body tense. We were approaching the intersection of Highway 50 and Route 376, a small gas station. Old Mom and Pop closes at 10, but leave. S lights on for self-service pumps. Another semi was parked there, a white Freightliner with Anderson Logistics on the side. The driver was outside checking tires. I started flashing my high beams frantically, hoping he'd notice. He looked up, shielded his eyes, took a step toward the road, confused. But as soon as we passed, I saw the black rig's high beams flare directly at him. The man stumbled, dropped his flashlight. The beams stayed on for 5 seconds, then went dark. Next 20 minutes felt like hours. Headlights stayed perfectly in place. Shirt soaked with sweat, even with AC running. CB still dead. Then I remembered my dash cam. Dual setup, front and rear, 6-hour memory. I made sure the little red light was on and adjusted the rear view mirror to catch the black rig. At least there'd be evidence if something happened. I'd been in close calls before. Tire blowouts, ice storms, even a drunk driver's sideswipe near Salt Lake. But this was different. Deliberate, calculated, patient. Whoever was in that truck was waiting for something. I had a sick feeling I knew what. Finally, the Hickison rest area sign appeared, 2 miles ahead. Not much, just a pull-off with picnic tables, basic facilities, clear road view in both directions, enough space to turn around quickly, and on a slight hill, high ground if things went bad. Paranoid? Sure. But when you've got 70 miles of nothing and someone's been stalking you for over an hour, Paranoid feels rational. I made my move, no signal this time, veered toward the exit at the last second. Black rig's brakes locked, squealed, but driver wrestled it onto the ramp behind me. I pulled into the rest area, headlights sweeping the empty lot. No other vehicles, no witnesses. I positioned my truck strategically, engine running, and waited. The black rig rolled in, stopped about 50 feet behind me, engine idling low and menacing. We sat for 5 minutes, or maybe an eternity. Neither of us moved. I could see the silhouette of the driver, tinted windows preventing detail. Then I noticed a second figure moving inside the cab, from sleeper to passenger seat. 2 of them. Options. None good. Couldn't outrun them. Their rig was newer, probably stronger. Fighting was impossible. I'm 53 with a bad knee, 2 of them. Hand on gear shift, ready to drive if either opened a door. Waiting was excruciating. Heartbeat louder than engines. Then, their CB crackled. Not words, just strange clicking. Rhythmic, almost Morse code. Click, click, pause, click, click, click. 30 seconds. Felt like a countdown. Headlights approached from the west. Nevada Highway Patrol Cruiser. Never been so happy to see those lights. Flashed high beams, hit air horn thrice. The universal trucker distress signal. Patrol car slowed, pulled in between me and black rig. Officer got out, hand near sidearm, walked to the black truck. Knocked, window rolled down a few inches, talked 2 minutes. Shone flashlight along sides, paused at trailer, took photos. Then he came to me, Officer Colton, mid-30s, serious. Asked if I was okay, if I'd been threatened. I told him everything, the following synchronized movements. Intimidation at gas station. He nodded, said 2 other reports that week of black semis stalking drivers, but I was first to stop. Plates registered to a shell company, non-existent. 3 drivers in last month robbed after being. G followed, forced off-road, cargo stolen. Backup arrived, 2 more patrol cars. Rest area looked like a crime scene. Officers surrounded black rig, weapons drawn. 2 men exited cab, hands up. Driver tall, gray hoodie, jeans, neck tattoo like barbed wire. Passenger shorter, shaved head, leather jacket. Calm, almost amused. Officers cuffed them, searched cab and trailer. Officer Colton told me they found a notebook with detailed logs, trucks they'd stalked, license plates, cargo manifests, driver names, home addresses, even my wife's name. Trailer empty except for tools, bolt cutters, crowbars, device probably to disrupt GPS. Professionals. Investigation took 2 hours, dash cam copied, statements taken. They were wanted in Utah and Arizona, part of a ring targeting truckers with electronics and pharmaceuticals. Black rig, 1 of 3, identical fake companies. They learned your patterns, waited for perfect strike. If I hadn't pulled into that rest area, if patrol car hadn't shown up, they'd probably run me off somewhere in the desert. Officer Colton gave me his card, said I'd testify eventually, offered to escort me to county line. I gratefully accepted. Pulled out, legs shaking, following patrol car. Looked back at black rig, floodlit, police tape, 2 men in separate patrol cars. Made it to Denver safely. Hugged Claire longer than usual. Took a week off. I still drive Highway 50 sometimes, part of my route. But now, I've got a loaded Glock in my cab, legal with concealed carry. Every time headlights appear in my mirror on those lonely stretches, pulse quickens, wondering if it's starting all over again. The National Weather Service had issued no warnings for Interstate 80 that night. Above the Nevada desert, the skies stretched wide and cloudless, a velvet canopy pricked with stars. Visibility was perfect, more than 10 miles in every direction. The desert air carried a crisp calm at a steady 62 degrees, the kind of night truckers considered a blessing. For Marcus Rodriguez, 34 years old and 12 years into a spotless career behind the wheel, it should have been nothing more than a routine run. Salt Lake City to Reno. He knew the route the way some men know their own backyards. His 2018 Peterbilt 579, polished to a shine and armed with every safety feature a trucking company could invest in, purred along the highway like a loyal beast. Preparation was Marcus's religion. Dispatchers still joked about how his logbook entries read like novels. Fuel consumption, road conditions, weather notes, even the kind of coffee he'd picked up at a truck stop. That October night, his record showed a departure from Salt Lake at exactly 9:47 p.m. His trailer carried delicate cargo, electronics bound for California, and every mile marker ahead was etched into his memory. I-80 west through the Nevada desert, Wendover, the Salt Flats, then the steady climb into the Sierra Nevadas. At 11:43 p.m., Marcus passed mile marker 45, running 4 minutes ahead of schedule. His headlights carved a tunnel of white through the endless black, the asphalt ahead gleaming like polished glass. The CB radio crackled now and then with far-off chatter, but mostly it was him, his truck, and the steady rhythm of the diesel engine. And then, at precisely 11:47 p.m., everything changed. An elderly woman appeared in his headlights near mile marker 48. She stood just off the shoulder, one arm raised in the universal plea for help, the other clutching a small suitcase. Marcus's heart jolted. He hit the brake. The hiss of compressed air filling the night as 18 tons of steel and cargo slowed to a stop 50 yards ahead of her. He'd picked up stranded motorists before, though company policy warned against it. But this woman seemed different. She looked to be in her 70s, dressed in a cream-colored gown far too formal for a midnight highway in the desert. Her silver-gray hair was styled neatly, as if untouched by wind or dust. Climbing down from his cab, Marcus noticed something stranger. In the glare of his headlights, the woman cast no shadow. "Thank you for stopping, dear," she said, her voice unnaturally clear, as if cutting straight through the desert silence. "I have been waiting such a long time." Her accent hinted faintly at Europe. German, perhaps. And when she smiled, Marcus noticed her teeth. Perfect, white, too flawless for her age. "What happened to your car, ma'am?" Marcus asked, scanning the roadside. No vehicle, no wreck, just empty desert in every direction. "There was an accident," she replied softly, adjusting her grip on the suitcase. "Such a terrible accident, but that was long ago. I need to get to Reno to see my daughter. She will be so worried." Something about her words sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Yet against all protocol and all logic, he found himself offering her a ride. Her hand, when he helped her into the cab, was ice cold despite the warmth of the desert air. She weighed almost nothing, as if her bones were hollow. Back on the highway, the woman spoke fondly of Reno. The streets, the buildings, even the old Mapes Hotel, closed since 2000, as if it were still welcoming guests. She mentioned traveling by train to visit her daughter, though passenger rail service hadn't run there in decades. Marcus chalked it up to age, maybe confusion, maybe trauma. Still, her stories had a haunting charm. 20 miles later, near Mudton, La Marker 68, her tone changed. She pointed ahead, her voice urgent. "Slow down here, dear. There's black ice just past that curve. Very dangerous for a truck like yours." Marcus frowned. His temperature gauge read 64 degrees, impossible for ice. Yet something in her voice, commanding, desperate, made him ease off the accelerator. "Ma'am, it's too warm for—" "Trust me," she cut in, her voice echoing strangely, as though layered with another tone. "I've seen what happens when drivers do not listen." Marcus turned to glance at her, and his blood ran cold. The passenger seat was empty. She was gone. The only evidence she had been there was the faint scent of old-fashioned perfume and a damp patch on the seat where her dress had rested. Marcus's hands trembled on the wheel. He slammed the brakes, pulled over, tore through the cab with a flashlight. Nothing. No trace. No footprints in the desert dust. Shaken, he forced himself back onto the road, and when his headlights swept around the curve, his heart nearly stopped. There it was, black ice, a thin, glassy sheet covering nearly a quarter-mile of asphalt. At his previous speed, his truck would have jackknifed instantly, sending 18 tons of metal and electronics careening into the desert. Slowly, carefully, Marcus navigated across, his traction control system clattering and fighting to keep grip. Once through, he snatched up his CB with trembling hands. Breaker 1N, this is Desert Runner eastbound at mile marker 70. Be advised, black ice westbound just past the curve at marker 69. A voice crackled back. Copy that, Desert Runner, but how'd you see it in this weather? Marcus hesitated. Just got lucky, I guess. But he knew better. The next morning in Reno, while his cargo was being unloaded, Marcus went to the Nevada Highway Patrol office. The desk sergeant, Patterson, a grizzled man who'd worked I-80 for 15 years, listened carefully. Then he reached for a file. What did she look like? Patterson asked. Marcus described her, the dress, the hair, the suitcase, the faint European accent. Patterson slid a yellowed newspaper clipping across the desk. The headline read, Elderly woman dies in I-80, accident near Hawk. The photo showed the same woman, the same cream-colored dress, the same suitcase. Her name was R. Eleanor Hoffman, age 73. In 1987, her Buick sedan had struck black ice and rolled near mile marker 48. She had been on her way to Reno to visit her daughter. She appears every few years, Patterson said gravely. Always around mile marker 48, always warning drivers. Some think she's just a hitchhiker until she vanishes. The accident photos in the file showed her Buick twisted across the same stretch of road Marcus had driven the night before. The strange thing, Patterson added, is she only shows up when there's real danger. Ice, washouts, drunk drivers. Every driver who's seen her has been saved. Marcus left the patrol office with a heart full of unease and gratitude. Weeks later, he commissioned a memorial stone near mile marker 48. The inscription read, Eleanor Hoffman, guardian angel of the highway. Truckers began leaving flowers, coffee cups, even tokens like toy trucks at the site. Stories spread. CB radios carried her voice. Some claimed to see a figure flagging them down, only for her to vanish when headlights drew near. The Nevada Department of Transportation, once skeptical, eventually acknowledged the phenomenon in their safety briefings. More signs, more maintenance, more awareness. That stretch of I-80 became one of the safest in the state. Not because of technology, not because of enforcement, but because of a ghost. A woman still making her final journey, still trying to reach her daughter in Reno. Today, veteran truckers still tell newcomers, if you see an elderly woman in a cream-colored dress on I-80, stop, listen, because she's not just a ghost, she's a guardian. And Marty, because to this day, repeats the words at truck stops across the country. She saved my life. She's still out there, making sure the rest of us get home safe. The desert highway stretched out like an endless ribbon, silvered by the pale glow of a reluctant moon. Out here, somewhere between Amarillo and Tucumcari, the night felt older than time itself. Truckers called it the Black Stretch, a place where CB chatter thinned, where even the bravest drivers grew quiet, and where mile markers didn't always play by the rules. Eddie Navarro had been hauling freight for nearly 15 years, but he had never trusted this highway. Not once. His father had warned him about it when he was still learning to shift gears in a beat-up Kenworth. The Black Stretch keeps its own count, the old man had said, eyes fixed on the horizon like he was seeing something no one else could. You think you're making progress, but sometimes it takes you backwards. And if you fight it, boy, It'll take more than miles from you." Eddie laughed about it back then. Tonight, he wasn't laughing. The dash clock read 2:07 a.m. His radio whispered static, broken only by the occasional voice of a lonely trucker far down the line. The desert around him was vast and empty, but the silence felt staged, like everything was holding its breath. He shifted in his seat, cracked the window, and listened. The hum of the engine, the whistle of wind, nothing else. Then he saw it. Mile marker 211, a green reflective post blinking past his headlights. He nodded to himself, glanced at his odometer, and counted the seconds until the next one. 58, 59, 60. The glow of the next sign slid into view. Mile 210. Eddie's brow furrowed. He hadn't slowed down. He sure as hell hadn't turned around, but the numbers were rolling backwards. He rubbed his eyes, muttered, "Don't start this crap tonight," and kept driving. The desert swallowed the road behind him, a black ocean with no shore. Up ahead, another sign flashed green. Mile 209. His throat tightened. The CB crackled to life then, sudden and sharp. A man's voice, deep and distorted, filled the cab. "Southbound Pete, you feeling it yet?" Eddie grabbed the mic, his voice dry. "This is Road Hand. Who's out there?" The reply came with a chuckle that seemed older than bones. "Don't matter what you call me, Road Hand. You're running the backwards mile now, same as the rest of us." Eddie's palms grew slick on the wheel. He glanced in the mirrors. Nothing but darkness stretching infinite. No headlights. No taillights. Not a soul in sight. Another marker loomed ahead. Mile 208. His stomach dropped. The voice returned, softer this time, like someone whispering directly in his ear. "Ain't no way forward once the mile takes you. You can burn fuel, you can break your rig, but you'll always come back around. Backwards, backwards, till the road eats you whole." Eddie slammed the mic down, cursed under his breath, and pressed harder on the throttle. The Pete growled, the speedometer climbing past 75. If this was some sick prank, he'd outrun it. If it wasn't, well, he wasn't ready to believe what the alternative meant. Mile marker 207 slid by, then 206, then 205. The road was chewing time, spitting it back at him, and with every sign, the desert seemed to lean closer, like unseen eyes were watching from the shadows just beyond his headlights. The Pete thundered down the black stretch, but no matter how much Eddie pushed, the highway refused to obey. The numbers kept counting down, dragging him deeper into some nightmare loop that smelled of hot asphalt and old diesel. Mile marker 204. Then 203. His jaw ached from clenching. He rolled the window all the way down, letting the desert air slap his face, hoping the cold would jolt him awake. Maybe this was fatigue, a hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. But the air wasn't crisp. It was stale, thick, like it had been trapped underground for centuries before seeping up through cracks in the pavement. The CB popped again, a different voice this time. A woman, soft, almost gentle. "You're burning daylight that ain't there, sugar. Best ease off before you run her dry." Eddie snatched the mic. "Who the hell is this? Where are you?" Silence, then laughter. Low and broken, as if more than one voice was tangled in her throat. "You'll see us soon." Eddie dropped the mic like it had scorched his hand. His headlights swept across another marker. Mile 202. His pulse thudded louder than the engine. And then, faint at first, he saw lights in the distance. Headlights, a whole string of them, shimmering like a mirage. Relief bloomed in his chest. Maybe it was a convoy. Maybe he wasn't alone out here after all. He closed the gap, the lights growing sharper, brighter. Old rigs, lined bumper to bumper, not modern trucks. These were antiques, relics from the 50s and 60s, chrome grills glinting, paint jobs dulled by decades of dust. They rolled in perfect silence, no engines, no exhaust, no road noise, just ghostly beams slicing the night. Eddie's skin crawled. He flicked his high beams, no response. He keyed the mic. "Convoy ahead. This is road hand on the southbound. You got your ears on?" Nothing but static. The trucks kept rolling. Slow, steady, like pallbearers at a funeral. Eddie eased back, trying to put distance between them, but the Pete resisted. The throttle felt heavy, sticky, dragging him forward whether he wanted it or not. Mile marker 201, then 200. And suddenly, a face. He saw it in the mirror. A man sitting in the cab of a nearby rig. Skin burned and blistered, eyes hollow sockets glowing faint red, mouth moving without sound. Eddie's heart lurched. He turned his head, and the truck wasn't there. Only blacktop. Only himself. The CB crackled a third time. The first voice returned, gravelly and slow. "Road hand, don't bother counting. We saw. And you hit 0, you'll understand. We all do." The static hissed and lingered, then cut out. Eddie's breath came fast, ragged. He tightened his grip on the wheel, but the rig felt different now. He could swear the Pete's heartbeat matched his own, pulsing through the steering column, syncing with him, like the machine had stopped being a truck and had become something else, something alive. Mile marker 199. The desert wind carried a sound then, faint, mournful, like distant horns echoing from another world. A convoy's call, a dirge for lost drivers. Eddie whispered to himself, voice cracking, "I'm not staying on this road. I'm not." But the highway didn't care. The black stretch had him now. Mile marker 198 slid past, glowing in the beam of Eddie's headlights like a warning carved in stone. His hands were slick on the wheel now, sweat running down his temples despite the desert chill. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to slam the brakes and abandon the Pete right there on the asphalt. But when he pressed his foot down, the pedal was locked. The truck would not obey. It was driving itself. The CB whispered again, so faint he almost mistook it for the wind. A dozen voices now, layered over one another, men and women, young and old, all speaking at once. "Keep her steady. Been running since 52. No brakes, no way out. The black stretch don't let go." Eddie screamed into the cab. "Shut up! Shut up!" The voices fell silent, but only for a moment. Then came the laughter. A long, rolling wave of it, low and guttural, filling the cab until Eddie felt it in his bones. He slammed a fist against the dash. "I'm not one of you. I ain't dying on this road." The convoy ahead brightened, headlights blazing like a wall of fire. And then, without warning, they vanished. Gone. Nothing but the endless black highway stretching forward. Mile marker 197, looming like a tombstone. Eddie's chest heaved, his vision blurred at the edges. He thought about his father, Old Man Callahan, a trucker who used to warn him about cursed roads and ghost rigs back in the 70s. Eddie had laughed then, called it folklore, but his father's last words before dying of a stroke rang in his ears now. "Some highways, remember, boy, don't drive 'em alone." The Pete groaned, metal straining, as though something beneath the asphalt pulled it downward. The steering wheel shuddered violently, nearly ripping from his hands. Eddie fought it, knuckles bone white, as the rig veered toward the shoulder. Gravel spat under the tires. And then he saw it. A glow ahead. Not headlights, not taillights, but flames. A pile of twisted wreckage burning on the side of the road. Tankers, flatbeds, old freight liners. Every truck he'd glimpsed in the phantom convoy. Their frames crushed, cabs mangled, chrome melted into black rivers. The smell hit next. Diesel and blood and scorched flesh. The ghosts had shown him their graveyard. Eddie gagged, bile rising in his throat. He tore his eyes away, but too late. The peat barreled straight through the burning wrecks. He braced for the impact, the crunch of steel on steel. Instead, the fire passed through him, cold as dry ice, filling the cab with a suffocating frost. His breath clouded. His skin turned to goose flesh. When the smoke cleared, the wrecks were gone. Only darkness remained. Mile marker, 196. Eddie knew then what was happening. The black stretch wasn't a road. It was a trap. Every mile he drove was another step into their world, another mile closer to zero. And when he reached it, he wouldn't just die. He'd join them. Forever. The CB clicked alive once more. A single voice this time. The woman again. Calm. Almost kind. You're close now, sugar. You can fight it. Or you can ride with us. Either way, the road always wins. Eddie's throat burned. He grabbed the mic, forcing words out between clenched teeth. If this road wants me, it's gonna have to drag me screaming. He yanked the wheel hard to the right. Tires shrieked. The peat fishtailed, skidding across both lanes. For a moment he thought it was working, the rig breaking free of whatever grip held it. But then, with a sound like tearing metal, the steering column snapped back on its own, straightening the truck with supernatural force. The black stretch would not let him leave. Mile marker, 195. Eddie roared, primal and desperate, slamming both fists into the wheel. Sparks danced at the edges of his vision. His body shook with rage and terror. He wasn't going quietly. And then, a light. Not ahead this time. Not fire or phantom rigs, but above. A pale, bluish glow, faint at first, then swelling until it bathed the entire desert in its eerie shine. Eddie craned his neck. The moon was gone, swallowed by clouds. This light had no source. It simply existed, pouring down onto the black stretch. The voices on the CB hushed, as if cowed by the glow. For the first time all night, the peat slowed. The pedals softened under Eddie's boot. The wheel eased in his hands. He gasped, hardly daring to believe it. The highway had loosened its grip. He stomped the brake. The truck screeched, tires smoking, until it shuddered to a dead stop on the shoulder at mile 194. The CB hissed. One last transmission. Desert Ghost himself. You bought yourself a mile, road hand, but we'll still be waiting. Sooner or later, everybody rides. The static cut off. The night went still. Eddie sat there trembling, staring at the glowing number stenciled on the marker post outside his window. 194. One breath away from being gone. He didn't sleep that morning, or the next. But when he finally rolled again, heading east toward Amarillo, and he never touched that stretch of highway again. Some roads weren't meant for the living. Some belonged to the dead. And the black stretch, it still waits. The rain had been hammering my windshield for the past 3 hours, relentless and unyielding, bouncing off the metal cab like tiny hammers. I was running on nothing but black coffee and whatever energy bars I'd grabbed at the last truck stop, the kind that taste like compressed cardboard but keep you awake long enough to push through the miles. I'd been hauling freight cross-country for about 12 years at that point, mostly electronics from warehouses in California, heading east, and I had learned to respect the mountain passes, the unpredictable weather, and the sheer monotony of long stretches where nothing seemed to move but my rig. It was early September 2016. That particular night, I was somewhere between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe, pushing my rig through the mountains in a storm that had intensified faster than I'd anticipated. My rig was fully loaded, about 78,000 pounds total, and every movement felt heavier in the rain. The CB radio crackled intermittently with static, like the universe itself was trying to warn me of something I couldn't yet see. Earlier that evening, my wife Amy had called. I could barely make out her voice over the wind and the hum of the rig's diesel engine, but I knew it was important. She told me our daughter Sophia had won her spelling bee at school, the pride and excitement in her voice cutting through the weariness I felt from 12 hours of driving. I clenched the steering wheel tighter at the thought, feeling that familiar ache of missing yet another milestone in her life. I'd promised them both that I'd be home by the weekend, and I was determined to keep that promise, no matter what the storm threw at me. The stretch of highway I was on was notorious among truckers. The locals had nicknamed it Dead Man's Curve for good reason. The road was lined with jagged rock walls on one side, sheer drops into the Fotkin, rested valleys on the other, and the switchbacks were enough to intimidate even the most experienced drivers. Add rain, slick asphalt, and limited visibility, and it became a place where accidents weren't just possible, they were expected. I had turned my music down to nothing, letting only the sound of the tires slicing through rainwater and the wiper's rhythmic slap dominate the cab. My headlights cut through sheets of rain, the beam reflecting off the slick asphalt in eerie glints. Visibility was maybe 30 feet at best, and I could feel the rig's massive weight shifting with each curve, the trailer threatening to push me toward the guardrail as I navigated each bend at a cautious 35 miles per hour. It was then, rounding a particularly nasty bend where the road curved sharply to the right, that I saw them. 3 small figures, standing directly in my lane, motionless in the downpour. My gut sank immediately. Years of experience as a long-haul driver had taught me to trust those instincts. I yanked the wheel hard to the left while easing on the brakes, careful not to slam them, knowing that jackknifing 78,000 pounds on a slick mountain curve would be a death sentence. The figures didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even react to my horn blaring or the massive 18-wheeler barreling toward them. They looked like children, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing bright yellow raincoats that glowed unnaturally under my headlights. Their hoods were pulled low over their faces, hiding their features, and their arms hung straight at their sides in a rigid, unnatural posture that made my chest tighten. The rig started sliding sideways, the trailer pushing me closer to the rock wall, tires screaming. I threaded the needle, inches from the figures on my left and the cliff edge on my right, feeling the entire rig shudder as I fought to keep control. Once past them, I immediately scanned for a place to pull over. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the engine and rain. About a quarter mile ahead, a small turnout appeared, barely large enough for my rig, but it would have to do. I grabbed my flashlight and dialed 911 with shaking hands, jumping out of the cab into the downpour. Rain soaked through my jacket instantly, but I didn't care. I had to check on those kids. The dispatcher answered immediately. I was practically shouting over the storm, giving mile markers, my position, describing the children in the road. She instructed me to stay in my vehicle for safety while she dispatched a patrol car, but I couldn't stay put. My boots slipped in the mud as I jogged back along the shoulder, flashlight beam cutting through the sheets of rain. When I reached the spot, there was nothing. No children, no raincoats, no trace that anyone had been there at all. I searched the roadside and nearby woods, calling out their names, but only the rain and distant thunder answered. 20 minutes later, a state trooper arrived, a younger man named Officer Ramirez, who looked genuinely concerned as I explained what had happened. He had me show him the exact spot, and together we combed the area with flashlights while the rain continued to pound down. He examined the skid marks my truck had left, took photos, and asked detailed questions about what I had seen. When he asked me to describe the children's faces, I realized I couldn't. The hoods had hidden every feature. And thinking back, I noticed they'd never looked up, not even as an 18-wheeler and 40 tons of metal slid toward them. Officer Ramirez went quiet for a moment, then asked me to follow him back to my truck. He pulled out his notepad and showed me a list of dates going back 2 years. Each entry documented a report from another driver, 3 children, in yellow raincoats, always in groups of 3, always at that same curve, always vanishing without a trace. He explained there had been 4 accidents at that location in the past 18 months, drivers swerving to avoid children who weren't there when authorities arrived. 2 had gone through the guardrail. He pointed toward the edge of the mountain where darkness swallowed the valley below, and I felt my mouth go dry, realizing how close I had come to joining that statistic. After the 3rd accident, authorities installed cameras at both ends of the curve, hoping to catch evidence. The footage never showed any children, but it did show something else. About a month ago, a beat-up white van had parked just around the blind side of the curve at 2:00 a.m., and someone had been dragging what appeared to be mannequins onto the road. By the time patrol units arrived, the van was gone, along with the mannequins. Officer Ramirez showed me a grainy photo on his phone. 3 child-sized figures in yellow rain gear, positioned exactly where I had seen them, but clearly artificial, rigid limbs and blank plastic faces under the hoods. The officer explained that investigators suspected a sinister setup, possibly insurance fraud or organized cargo theft. The mannequins were designed to force drivers into accidents or sudden stops. While the driver dealt with the children, accomplices could raid the trailer. Indeed, evidence of break-ins had been found on 2 trucks involved in previous incidents, though the drivers hadn't survived to confirm the details. The mannequins were weighted at the base to stand upright in strong winds, and the yellow raincoats were reflective enough to shine brilliantly under headlights. Whoever had orchestrated this had clearly planned every detail for maximum effect at the sharpest part of the curve, where drivers had the least reaction time. Officer Ramirez asked me to check my trailer locks and seals. Fresh scratches, tools had been tampering with them before something interrupted the criminals. Then we heard the roar of another diesel engine approaching the mountain. The officer immediately called in, requesting all commercial traffic be stopped until we cleared the scene. The sound of the approaching truck was getting dangerously close, and neither of us wanted it to be the next victim. The officer ran to his patrol car and activated every light, turning the scene into a flashing riot of blue and red against rain-soaked rock walls. I grabbed my emergency flares and ran back toward the curve, igniting them along the road to warn the incoming driver. The truck's Jake brakes screamed through the valley, a stuttering roar echoing off the mountains, signaling the driver had noticed us and was trying to slow down. Around the bend, a woman, probably in her mid-50s, gray hair pulled into a ponytail, rolled down her window, visibly shaken. "Did you see them?" she asked before either of us could speak, explaining she had encountered 3 children in yellow raincoats near a pull-off 2 miles back. But when she checked her mirrors after passing, they had vanished. Officer Ramirez called for backup, suspecting multiple locations were being used or that the perpetrators had moved after seeing the police lights. The woman, Gloria, had been driving this route for 15 years and had heard the stories about Dead Man's Curve, but never believed them until that night. As we spoke, another report came through the officer's radio. A white van speeding down a service road parallel to the highway toward the valley. Perfect timing. Ramirez instructed Gloria and me to continue to the next town to file reports, but I couldn't leave without following. He agreed, forming a small convoy, his patrol car leading, my rig behind, Gloria following. More police units raced past us up the mountain. 10 minutes later, we reached an old, abandoned way station. There it was, a white van, engine still warm, doors open. Inside, 3 child-sized mannequins in yellow raincoats. More mannequins in other outfits, ropes, tools, and electronic devices for monitoring police scanners. The criminals were gone, fleeing into the forest. Police brought in dogs, searched all night, but the rain had washed away much of the scent. Footprints led to a creek where the tracks disappeared, indicating someone highly skilled at evasion. Notebooks were recovered, detailing trucking routes, delivery schedules, and specific cargo manifests. My company's logo appeared on one, with notes about electronics shipments I regularly hauled. Maps marked dozens of mountain roads in California and Oregon with dates and codes, still being decoded. The FBI became involved the next morning, treating it as organized interstate cargo theft. They interviewed me for 3 hours, dissecting every detail of what I had experienced. Similar schemes were reported in Washington and Idaho, always using mannequins to cause crashes or emergency stops, always targeting specific cargo. They never caught the perpetrators, at least not that I know. Authorities installed more cameras, increased patrols, and issued alerts to commercial drivers about the mannequin scheme. For weeks afterward, truckers shared stories on the CB about close calls and suspicious figures. I finished my delivery to Elko a day late, explaining everything to my dispatcher, who had already heard about the incident on the news. When I finally got home that weekend, I hugged Amy and Sophia longer than usual, unable to articulate why the memory of that storm, the mannequins, and the near miss haunted me so deeply. I still drive that route, and yes, I slow down at Dead Man's Curve EVs, and in perfect weather. Other drivers do too. You can tell by the way their brake lights flare before the bend. The worst part is the lingering uncertainty. Every shadow, every object on the roadside at night, even a stray tire or trash bag, makes me wonder if it's them again. If tonight's the night another driver won't be as lucky. After my incident, my company installed dash cams in all trucks, and I keep that footage saved on my phone. Proof of the 3 yellow figures in the rain that nearly cost me everything. Proof that sometimes the real monsters are just people with a plan. Most people don't truly understand the level of isolation you experience driving trucks for a living. It's not just the hours on the road, the monotony of passing cornfields, or the same stretches of asphalt. It's the way the world seems to vanish the moment you leave civilization behind. That late October of 2022, I had been hauling freight across the Midwest for about 8 years. By then, I thought I understood the rhythm of the job, the quiet that comes with hours of solo driving, and the occasional thrill of navigating remote stretches of highway at night. I was 43, divorced, living alone in a small apartment just outside Columbus, Ohio. Life had settled into a predictable pattern, and the road had become both my workplace and my refuge. That particular week had been uneventful. Routine deliveries, familiar routes, and nothing that stood out beyond the usual long drives, truck stops, and instant coffee consumed at rest areas. Thursday afternoon changed everything. Dispatch called me with a last-minute urgent delivery. Some agricultural equipment needed to reach a farm roughly 2 hours outside of Des Moines, and it had to be there that same night. The pay was double the usual rate, a tempting offer, especially with the holidays approaching and bills stacking up. Should have been my first warning sign. Money has a peculiar way of clouding judgment, of making you ignore that little voice in the back of your mind that whispers, "Don't go." The directions led me farther out than I had anticipated. Civilization thinned until paved roads gave way to gravel, and then gravel twisted into dirt. My GPS repeatedly recalculated, attempting to figure out exactly where I was supposed to end up. Around 9:30 p.m., I finally spotted the place. A massive wooden gate with Donovan Farm painted on a crooked sign that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 70s. By this point, my headlights had already scanned across empty fields on either side. Dead corn stalks standing like silent sentinels in neat rows, eerily illuminated in the night. Mr. Donovan had called me multiple times before my arrival. His voice carried an urgent edge, insisting that the equipment had to arrive that night. No delay, no exceptions. When I finally drove through the gate, the house appeared about a quarter-mile back from the road, dark except for one faintly glowing window on the second floor. The delivery instructions, however, directed me further into the property, to a barn another half-mile past the house, nestled deep into the shadows. The barn itself was enormous, painted red but weathered by decades, with sliding doors that must have stood 20 feet tall. Mr. Donovan was waiting outside, standing beneath a single floodlight that barely pushed back the darkness. He was about 60, thin, overalls hanging loosely over a plaid flannel shirt. His movements were restless, eyes darting constantly to the shadows behind the barn and toward the truck. The urgency in his voice was palpable, bordering on frantic, and he kept wringing his hands together, dirt deeply embedded under his fingernails, as if it had become part of him. He rushed me through pleasantries, gratitude spilling out, emphasizing how crucial this delivery was for their operation, not their farm. The word operation stuck with me. Not farm, not business, operation. There was something about it, the choice of words, the tone, that made my skin crawl. We backed the trailer to the barn doors. That's when things started to feel wrong. Usually clients have a team to help unload, especially with heavy equipment. Mr. Donovan insisted it was just the two of us. He claimed his workers had gone home for the day, but the delivery couldn't wait until morning. The cargo was 3 massive crates, each probably weighing 800 pounds. No way 2 men could handle them alone without proper machinery. When I voiced this concern, Donovan mentioned a forklift supposedly inside the barn, insisting we could break down the crates and move the components in pieces. It made no logical sense. Why disassemble equipment only to carry it deeper into the barn? But he was already prying open the first crate with a crowbar, so I slipped on my gloves and followed him. The extra pay made me suppress questions I would normally ask. Inside the first crate, the contents were clearly machine parts. Steel frames, conveyor pieces, some grinding mechanism. He grabbed one end of a frame, motioning for me to take the other. The barn doors loomed before us like a black void. As we carried the first piece inside, he continued talking about expanding his operation, the booming business, and the need for increased capacity. Everything about the surroundings contradicted his words. No tire tracks but mine, no lit windows in the outbuildings, nothing suggesting recent activity. Once inside, the smell hit me. Hay, motor oil, and an underlying metallic tang that made me breathe through my mouth. A single bulb hung 30 feet above us, leaving much of the barn shrouded in darkness. Then I noticed movement. Shuffling sounds deeper in the barn, quiet, deliberate, like someone trying not to be heard. My instincts screamed danger. Shadows began to materialize against the far wall, human-shaped forms standing completely still. Initially, I thought they might be equipment or stacks of hay, but one shifted slightly, just a small movement, enough to confirm that these figures were alive. At least 4, possibly more. They were waiting. Donovan's voice rose, frantic, urging me to bring the equipment further inside to reach the forklift. Every rational instinct urged me to retreat. Calmly, I set down my end of the frame and told him I needed to check my truck. His expression shifted instantly, the nervous urgency transformed into something colder, meaner. His hand moved to his pocket, and the shadows began advancing, spreading to block any route deeper into the barn. One knocked a metal object against the concrete floor. The sound echoed, amplifying the tension. Donovan stepped toward me, his tone cold and authoritative, no longer the frantic farmer. I backed up steadily, keeping my eyes on him while noting the movement of the shadows. I feigned a minor issue with tire pressure to justify retreat. He hesitated, a brief, critical pause. That hesitation was enough. I kept backing toward the barn doors, boots crunching over gravel. The shadows quickened, voices low and urgent. Donovan followed, attempting to persuade me to return, claiming his nephews were helping inside. Nephews indeed. When I reached my cab, he grabbed my arm, pulling hard. I freed myself, shoved him back, and slammed the door. Through the side mirror, I saw 3 men emerge from the barn, built like laborers jogging toward the truck. One brandished a crowbar. I started the engine. Donovan leapt onto the running board, trying the door handle, shouting threats, face twisted with rage. The men closed in. I slowly moved forward, forcing him to release his grip. But I needed to secure the trailer. I moved 50 yards, jumped out, uncoupled the 5th wheel quickly. The men were running now, shouting instructions. It dawned on me. They didn't want the equipment. They wanted my truck. I leapt back into the cab just as one swung the crowbar. The windshield held as I gunned the engine, leaving them in dust and diesel exhaust. Donovan screamed, waving wildly. I drove straight through the wooden gate, debris flying, and didn't stop until reaching the main highway. At the first lit truck stop, I called 911. The responding sheriff's deputy inspected the truck and listened to my statement. His expression betrayed recognition. This wasn't his first report of strange activity on these back roads. He noted the men's descriptions, warned me the site would likely appear normal by the time authorities arrived, cleaned of evidence, and perhaps a complaint about stolen equipment fabricated. The next morning, my dispatcher confirmed the delivery was a complete setup. The shipping company didn't exist, paperwork was forged, payment authorization from a stolen card, the number Donovan called from a burner. Entirely orchestrated. Talking to other drivers, I learned this was not an isolated case. Similar schemes appeared across states: night deliveries, isolated locations, urgent payment promises. Drivers who went inside were often reported missing. Trucks found stripped far from the original site. Drivers never recovered. The FBI had task forces, but the operations were always a step ahead, mobile and adaptive. I was lucky. Lucky I noticed the shadows, trusted my instincts and left in time. Now I stick to daytime deliveries, established companies. If a job seems too good to be true, I pass. Some money isn't worth the risk. Driving trucks teaches you about isolation, danger, and human cunning. That night at Donovan Farm reminded me that even familiar roads and ordinary deliveries could hide unspeakable threats, waiting for drivers who underestimated the darkness and the men who lurk within it.